Hey everyone, Mrhappy here, and welcome to Mondays with Mrhappy, aka Mrhappy Mondays, the weekly Q&A show where you ask me questions and I answer them. Sorry, this is going to be a little bit of like a dark corner back here because I'm recording this a little bit later into the evening. Normally, I live stream these, and I've done a few weeks recently where I haven't been live during these recordings. That being said, this week I took a day off because 4.5 is Tuesday, so I wanted to have a day, collect my energy, then stream on Monday, the day you'll be seeing this. And then Tuesday, we'll be up bright and early, going through all the story, going through Extreme Seiryu, going through the 24-man, everything that's available tomorrow, and the same thing next week with Blue Mage. So I took today off to watch the first day of AGDQ, which has been spectacular. I just finished watching the Portal run, if you're looking to date this video right before I started recording this, and Metal Gear Solid 2, I believe, is going on right now. Had to take a break, though, because I was like, no, maybe after the next run I'll do it. I was like, maybe after Majora's Mask. And I saw Portal was only 15 minutes. I was like, okay, maybe after Portal. And I was like, no, really, I need to record the weekly Q&A. We only have a few questions over here on the forums, and on top of that, I have to thank our Patreon sponsors, of course. Now, before I even start listing Patreon, I'm going to be going through this list. There's a large amount of pruning that needs to be done with some of these names, because even though I haven't gotten alerts, I know some of these names either need to be shifted around or don't belong on this list anymore. I almost omitted them, other than the Patrons of Light, altogether this week, because now at the new year, I really got to go through and make sure the names are accurate, make sure there aren't people that are supposed to be on this list that aren't, and vice versa, and yada, yada, yada. So, if they're not done by next week because of 4.5 shenanigans this week, next week I may not read patron sponsors other than the Patron of Light, just to give you a heads up. This week I'll do it, though, just because it's our first Mondays with Mrhappy of the new year. The last one was on New Year's Eve. Happy New Year, by the way, everybody. So we have to thank our Patreon sponsors for supporting us, of course, through hashtag demonetized over the past year. It's been almost a year that we've had the Patreon in place, and it has moved to a more supportive role if you enjoy the content and you just want to kind of counterbalance the way that YouTube's algorithms work, because it's definitely been more harmful than good over the last few years, especially with the demonetization problem. That's what that's mostly been there for at this point. But we have our Patrons of Light. We, of course, have Khuja Cross on Jenova and Kurenai Oni, who have been massive supporters. Khuja Cross has been a Patron of Light for almost the whole year since we first introduced our Patreon last year. And Kurenai has been on the list. He's moved around, and now he's here, and he's been an awesome supporter as well. So thank you to both of you. You've been seeing images on the screen at this point of them as well, as is tradition. We also have our long list, which, again, is going to be getting pruned sometime this month. But I still want to thank everyone who I at least currently have on it. So we have our standard sponsors, Wabatalia, Alma Elma, Dark Lumina from Jenova, Marianne, Remil Gaming, Sabo Empire, Mizra, Red Wings of the Baron FC from Zalera, Cidus, Oreo and Shiva, Syd Hellwind of Gilgamesh, Afro Ninja from Malboro, Cheesecake from Leviathan, That Lame Weeb, Ashen, Emiya of Cerberus, Fafarian, Rendil, Stevie-Rex, and Neon. We have our elite sponsors. We have Nyrek, Vizsla of the Red, Krista Azuki, Crazed Demeter of Midgard, Raijin Ventinus from Cactar, Carol, Ray, Senchi, Shadowlink on Tomberry, Dom, Asuka Wake from Jenova, Limilla Nelhah of Midgard Summer, Saren the Fennel Family, Janhyua Yotsuyu, Kifkin the Great Eagles on Exodus, Dark Graver, Katayoshi from Khuja, Skia Symphonia from Ragnarok, Rylanator Westaus The Purple Warrior, Magic Red Steel on Exodus, Lexxie Valentine, Mantaru the Rivivus FC from Zodiac, Sour Cream, and Chives from Jenova. That was the last name on the... No, it wasn't. Rynoet Chikara, Goisha Valfriend of Siren, Phoenix Down, FC on Goblin, and Saren from Zodiac. The color of the fonts changed, and I thought that the list changed for some reason. I don't even know why the color of the fonts are different. And then we have our premium sponsors. These are the second highest tier, right below our Patrons of Light. We have Zaravire of Coral, Alchemy, Shinka, Casual Heroes FC on Midgard Armor, Tatachi Taka on Hyperion, Kanazuki from Jenova, U-Star on Coral, Sathal, Sarah Frost from Behemoth, Holy Tabasco, Red Thorn Asura, Crash 015, Mustang, Serenity FC on Ultras, Kat Kazuma, Ignis Fairground from Excalibur, Valestra of Fanfrit, Not Quarters from Excalibur, Corvus Moonscar, Private Mikey, Nadi Kirasami, Rudy Whittaker, Killer Hackman, Wall Jr., and Kiltastic Jones. Thank you to all of our patrons, and if after I check your name doesn't belong on there anymore, well, thank you, because that means that at some point you were on that list, and I appreciate that support all the same. So anyway, let's get into our questions. We only have a few, and then I can get back to watching GDQ. I forgot what's after Metal Gear Solid 2, and I still don't know, so I'm going to wait. Anyway, let's get started. All right, question number one. Happy New Year's. Happy New Year's to you, too. I hope your 2019 starts off strong. It started off light. I didn't want to do too much at the beginning. The entire last several months have been very rough. Just a bad first, I guess, holiday season with certain things having happened in 2018, as I'm sure many of you know. And so with January, I wanted to make sure I took the first week and kind of take my time with it, because January is already a terrible month for YouTube content. I'm sure you've heard this from other content creators as well. It's the month where advertisers don't pay much at all. So YouTube content for that month, generally, you either have to triple your content or at least put out the consistent stuff and then just kind of ride through it. And with 4.5 out on the 8th, I don't know why I was having such a hard time saying that. Wanted to save all my energy for producing that and stuff for Blue Mage and Kingdom Hearts 3 and etc, etc. Anyway, in Heaven's Word, we got new jobs at 30, and in Stormblood, we get them at level 50. Do you think they'll start a trend of releasing new jobs at 50 so we have the essentials, or will they raise the new job starting level every time they raise the level cap? I joined during Heaven's Word, so I don't know if they've already set a trend and I'm missing. No, so those are basically the two things they did. When they did that with Heaven's Word, the number one complaint was actually that you had to basically go through all of those story quests, all of the A Realm Reborn story quests, and the first few quests in Heaven's Word before you could even get to those jobs. So what did they do? They did the new ones at level 50, which at that point pretty much makes sense. That way, as soon as you hit level 50 and before you start your trek through the A Realm Reborn quest, basically like the opposite of the other ones, you have access to these new jobs in case you want to try them out. And I think that's what they'll do going forward. Now, I wouldn't be surprised to see them be level 60 instead, but I have a feeling level 50 is going to be our starting level for new non-limited jobs. I guess I should make that distinction. Like whatever the Gunblade user ends up being called and whatever the other job or jobs we may be getting in the expansion itself. So I think level 50 will be the norm. Again, it lets you switch jobs before doing the A Realm Reborn story quest. You kind of have, I guess, all the basics of what your job kit would be by that level, and you don't have to start all the way from level 1. So they could do level 60, but I also think they'll just want to make it so that if you have the expansion purchased, that you can unlock it as soon as you hit the end of A Realm Reborn. I think that's going to be the goal that they end up going for in the future. We'll have to wait and see, and we'll know several months from now. So we won't have to wait too much longer to get that information for certain. But thank you for your question. Thank you for your asking. You said thank you for my time, so I'm going to thank you for asking. And have a good day. You have a good day as well. Okay, we got a lot of text here, but it looks like it's like 5 different questions. So this is going to be a fun one. Hey, what's up? Happy New Year, finger guns. Hey, what's up? A topic that is brought up a lot in endgame rating community is the topic of limit breaks and whether or not their current implementations are good game designs. Chief complaints. Never mind. This isn't 5 questions. These are just complaints about limit breaks. How do you feel limit breaks as they are currently implemented? Oh my goodness, there's even more text. How do you feel about limit breaks as they are currently implemented in 14? What changes are needed? Has there been a situation where an LB felt great that sticks out to you? Higher echelon if logs used take the most damage at critical levels. So I very quickly skimmed through all of these. It's often a no-brainer. Healer LB opens up chi strategies. Melee DPS arguing with melee DPS gets to remain. The higher echelon of log players deliberately generate their limit break, and Bards and Machinists never use their LB. So how do you feel limit breaks are currently implemented in 14? I think for the most part they're in a fine spot. I think the biggest problem actually is I'd actually like Bards and Machinists, and I'm sorry for Bards and Machinists to hear this. I miss the healer LB. Because your second question is, has there ever been a situation where using an LB felt great that sticks out to you? Healer LB is almost always the one that feels great, because it either leads to a recovery that's totally unexpected, or it leads to the most hilarious raid night and death of all time, where everyone gets up, the person who did the LB dies, and everyone else dies immediately after. My ultimate coil of Bahamut clear, 7 of us, I believe, died to a flare breath after a tank got killed by a flatten, but the healer stepped off to the side and used the healer LB3 to save us all. We didn't need that LB3 to meet the DPS check for the ad phase that came right after, although most groups would definitely prefer to have 2 LBs in that phase. We didn't. We just worked with what we had, and that was more than enough, actually. There's some decent tank LB strats that you can come up with that can trivialize certain mechanics, mostly because of the way LB generation works when you're under the tank LB3, that allows you to get a lot of it back. And you've seen this maybe in 012 for MNF, or maybe used in 011 to skip something like the Red Fists, for example, in the later part of the fight. And I think there's a lot of decent uses of that. And then when you don't have these more ambiguous uses, then you have, caster LB for multiple targets, and you have the single target LB for the melees. I don't really see much of the other things as much of a problem. I think I'm 50-50 on the fence about the abusal of LB generation, because it's something that comes into play a lot in speed kills, and that's kind of the place where I feel like that stuff is the most fitting. Like, your average group doesn't do these whole, LB generation strats. It's just not something that a brand new group that's not comfortable with the fight really does. That's an optimization, and I would never want to take away a piece of optimization. But the fact that you can do certain things with the LB, like you can, the O12 male and female section in Savage, where you can basically chain tank LB3 back to back to like ignore a vast majority of the mechanics in the very end of the fight, that I'm not a big fan of. Admittedly, it's a slower way of doing it, but the fact that it works in such a way where you tank LB3, you get so much LB back from the tank LB3 that you can then do it again, and then you still generate enough to do a melee LB. It's like, that's insane. That in particular, the amount of LB you generate off of using tank LB3, that might be the only one where I feel like maybe it's a little overboard. But other than that, I'm pretty happy with the way limit breaks are. The only thing is Bards and Machinists limit break, just, there's very few scenarios where it is good. I could probably name a few. I think one in Alexander with one of the ads right after they changed it is a big one. But like, in general, it just feels like they ran out of ideas. At this point, they might as well just give them something similar to what Black Mage, Summoner, and Red Mage have, like an AoE effect that does the damage, the exact same thing, but with their own effects anyway. They could even just change the area, and the animation just has to be changed around that. But I don't know. I'm fine with them. I think that they're used sometimes deliberately, and I think it makes for a cool visual effect. And I think that maximizing on them is a nice way to add optimization to groups that otherwise may be optimized completely on the jobs themselves. So then optimizing that group play to make the best use of the limit break becomes the next tier of things, and it's a lot more interesting than just kind of accepting that you've done what you can for your job and there's not really much else that you can do to improve the room. Just Bard and Machinist, I'd like to change it maybe a little bit on the tank LB3, generating extra LB from the damage that you take from it because of the way that mitigation works for generating LB. And that in general might need adjustments, but I just really like seeing speed kill groups abuse that stuff to optimize their runs because it's fun. All right, question number 3. Greetings, Mr. Happy. I hope this reaches you in good health and good spirits. It has indeed, and thank you. So a while back during the beginning of Omega, you mentioned how the environment that the Omega raids present would make it possible to face the heroes of Final Fantasy in a raid environment. I do not think that would happen because the bad guys series always seem more powerful, thus the heroes have to team together to take on the big bad in their respective game. This line you mentioned has led me to a couple different questions. All right. Well, first one is, how would you rank the heroes in Final Fantasy series in power scale? Which hero would represent each game in the series? Obviously, some of them are easy picks, like Noctis for 15, but some might be interesting as who you would pick as the strongest. Final Fantasy 9 versus Final Fantasy 10, for example. Cidus, in my mind, is always just, if it wasn't for your power in the actual fights, he's a pussy. I don't, like, he's down there for me. Like, Final Fantasy 1, you're the proclaimed warrior of light. Final Fantasy 2, I probably wouldn't rank too high on the power scale. Final Fantasy 3, again, proclaimed warrior of light. Anything where you're the proclaimed warrior of, like, destiny is often kind of one of those cases where you have to argue that that could be a very strong iteration of the main character. When you have characters that kind of just play out, it's harder to place them. You kind of have to consider their actual feats versus, what there is. Like, for example, amongst the warriors of the light in Final Fantasy V, Galuf, I would argue, is the strongest of the bunch, and I don't think many would be pressed to disagree, especially given his age and his wisdom. But then you have to consider, like, Bartz is considered kind of like the main protagonist there, and to me, he doesn't come off as like a super strong guy. Final Fantasy VI, you have Terra, who I'd imagine, as long as she has the Esper as part of her power, has a near limitless amount of power, and there's just, I don't think you can really properly scale them. You can't even look at, like, Dissidia for any sort of idea, because they're all power scaled to the point where they're considered equals, and so are the villains at that point, which I also wouldn't agree with, because again, the villains are often about, as you've described, teaming up to take down the big bad, and in this case, meh. I do think Noctis for 15 is a big one in terms of the power scale. Of course, actually, Lightning is pretty high up there. She has pretty good representation in terms of what her, like, true power is across the 3 games. She goes on to becoming a literal god slayer, so it's hard to argue against that. She gets her power gets a little bit out of control. She goes from, like, Goku in Kaioken to, like, Super Saiyan 3 Goku in the 2nd game to, like, Ultra Instinct in the 3rd game, and it's just like, how did this power scaling work with you right now? So that's the best answer I think I can give. It's just kind of my thought process on how I would kind of go about that. 2, which heroes would you want to fight in 14? I don't like the idea of fighting the heroes or villains unless they're very well implemented. Like, Cloud of Darkness in the Crystal Tower, I thought was done really well, and I was really happy with that sort of reference to it. But then you get the really lazy ones like X-Death and Kefka, and I'm like, okay, honestly, like, yeah, okay, ooh, Kefka's in Final Fantasy 14, but It's so uninteresting. All they did was literally like say, hey, there's this legend, and they repeat what he did in 6, and then here's a fake version of it. I'm just like, that's so uninteresting and not creative at all that I honestly don't care. And it makes me even more so not want heroes or villains in, unless it's part of a collaboration event, which we've already had stated are not canon with the game. Koji has stated that collaboration events are not canon with the events of Final Fantasy XIV. They're for fun, pretty much. So I don't really have any interest in fighting any of the heroes. Like, it's just not something that's high on my priority list. And as someone who's never played much of the series before 7, I just thought you might have some good ideas, at least could have some good discussion. Well, hopefully it was good enough. Unfortunately, the second question, I don't have much an opinion about, so I probably gave you kind of like a lame answer that you're gonna be like, well, that sucks. But I'm sorry, it's you asked me what I thought, and that's what I thought, so I gave it to you. Happy New Year. Thank you for asking your question, and have a good one. Question number 4. Greetings, Mr. Happy. Greetings to you. I'm the person who asked Yoshi P about tank accessories at FanFest 2018. It's a topic that has weighed heavily on my mind because I've been raiding in the game since Gordius. God help your soul that you started raiding in Gordius. God help your soul. As someone who is there. Fundamental problem is that tanks are the only role whose main set doesn't contribute to their damage. Every other role, including healers, have a main set that contributes to their damage output. Our main set is vitality, but our damage comes from strength. The latter doesn't scale as well as on accessories, which is why tanks used to wear sling accessories. Hit me this morning. There's an obvious solution that wouldn't take too much work. Make vitality contribute to tank damage and not contribute any HP. Then change tenacity to provide HP the same way that piety provides MP. Just the jobs is necessary to scale their HP as they level, perhaps they're an HP passive. They could change the description of tenacity to affect maximum HP, make it similar to the piety stat. I think really so for me, the bigger issue is not that. The bigger issue is the fact that they had vitality affect your damage. And I know that back then it also affected your HP. I thought that was fine. The problem was they wanted to change the weakness effect to only affect damage and not HP. And so thus it couldn't affect vitality because vitality was a part of your damage. I mean, here's the thing. They could have just left it with the 0.45 in strength, 0.45 attack and vitality. In vitality, I can't speak. And still just make the current one just reduce your strength because strength is already a lower portion of your damage. But I don't know. I personally thought it was okay in the late 3.x when they decided to do that. And I'd like to go back to that exact form. I don't think that tenacity. Here's the thing, you could do this and it sort of makes tenacity a more valuable stat, but then people are going to complain that they have to take stats away. They have to take damage away from their substat choice, and there's going to be like a mandatory minimum in tenacity, and that's going to cause a bunch of problems on its own. It is a viable option, though. I won't say it's not viable. It just comes with its own set of issues, and it's a matter of weighing the way it is now versus the way it is later. It is worth mentioning Yoshida is still not happy with how much DPS tanks put out, meaning he thinks still once again that they are putting out too much, and we are likely to see adjustments that reduce that compared to the other jobs coming out of 5.0. So there's a big question about what is going to happen when it comes to tanks and their actual output in the next expansion, and we don't know. But I would take your change. I would just accept. I'm not a tank, so I mean, I've already stated what the problems could be, but it's fine. And by my eyes, the issue then becomes you have to equip certain things with enough tenacity, and there's like I think at this point you've gotten my point. There's other issues that would come, but I couldn't tell you which one's the better option. I can only tell you that I don't expect you to get much more in the way of damage anyway, or for you to be vying for more damage stats no matter what to make up for whatever you're about to lose damage-wise coming in 5.0. Question number 5. You guys have got a lot of text in these questions this week. Oh my goodness. That's okay. I'm not doing the live questions anyway. Hey, Haps, you doing alright? I'm doing alright. I'm doing alright. You doing alright? I'm doing alright. Since you didn't like my last bonus of an expedited development of everyone's favorite aquatic football game, instead of a potion of perpetual grease lightning, I hear you like punchy boys. And that I do. And that I'll take. Thank you. I was listening to last week's Mondays and you touched upon what I wanted to ask. One job, multiple roles. You mentioned something to the effect that if they want to add a new role, they should add a new job. I feel that somewhat misses the point. Let's say I really enjoy the class fantasy of Paladin, but I don't want to always think. No. Listen, this is just going to be a repeat of last week's question. I totally got what you were saying. I'm also just telling you why they don't do it. Because they've already learned with Summoner and Scholar that balancing two jobs around one class sucked. And they said they don't want to do it ever again. Doing two roles that come from one job is pretty much the equivalent of doing that again, just without giving it two different names. Then you have Holy Paladin, Protection Paladin, for example. And so they've already expressed a great disinterest in ever going down that route again. And the functional reason why those things are the way they are, as I described them last week. So that's why I don't see them ever doing it. I don't see why they would ever do it outside of meeting class fantasies, which I believe I said last week as well. And I mean, my answer, I guess, really just hasn't changed. What's it called? I feel like 14 in general lacks character customization. As far as I can remember, there's no way to customize your character's playstyle other than switching jobs. If you don't agree that 14 lacks customization, why not? If you do agree yet you're not convinced job customization is the answer, character customization is largely unnecessary, mostly because one character can do everything. The reason why character customization comes so much into play in a lot of other online games is because there's some other limitation as to what you can achieve within one given character. Any game where you could like play as anything, there is no limitation. So pretty much anything they do, every character is potentially affected by. You know, whereas before, like let's say in WoW, they make a change to Rogue. It's so stupid, me. They make a change to Rogue in WoW. You know, that only affects your Rogue character. Your Warlock character doesn't really give a shit. Your Paladin doesn't really give a shit. But here, if they change your Ninja, and that's a job you were playing on that character, well, now you might just have to completely go, well, I've already been spending tomes on Ninja now on the same character. I need to adjust. I need to send all that to another. I need to readjust kind of my priorities on this one character. It's not that it lacks customization, is that you have so many options that customization isn't as required. That's, I guess, the big thing here. Your job, your goal should be to master the job you want to play. And if you're looking for branching play styles, you look to another job instead of looking for a different play style within your current job. And I'll give you this. That's not something everyone wants. Again, we've listed Holy and Protection Paladin and different specs in World of Warcraft as, you know, reasonable things that just are there to fulfill class fantasy for in terms of role-playing, whereas in terms of effective character use, you need to have those options so that way your one character isn't locked into one thing. Here, we don't have to worry about that at all. I don't think customization really does anything in MMOs in the first place. Although, to be fair, you're not asking for like a skill tree or anything like that. I believe skill trees are worthless in MMOs because whatever's best is what you're going to play, and that's pretty much it. Like, that's always going to be the case. Maybe one situation you're better for AoEing, and another situation you're better at single target, and you adjust things for that. Or you could just have everything and just be good in any situation as long as you're a good enough player. So that's, I kind of hope what I'm saying is getting across, because I'm just basically saying customization is near pointless. And in fact, I think that the actual physical appearance of your character, I think that character customization is more important to a lot of people than the actual customization of within one job that you actually want to play. Question number 6, Haps. So it feels like the holiday events are getting really stale, with the same ones being played out over and over each year. Should Square Enix try and come up with innovative ways to present these holiday events, or Square Enix just produce new and different holiday events? Have you been around? Because other than the mochi pounding one is kind of the norm, but we got a completely different event for the last, well, Halloween they did it completely different 3 years ago, and since they've done different things with the quest line, but they've still included the haunted house for everyone because everyone said they loved it. And I'd imagine putting that much more work into Halloween isn't going to work out too well. But we just had the Christmas event. That's never been a rhythm game before. We had the Jump Tower a while back for the Summer Festival. They never did that before. It didn't have any rewards, but it was a nice challenge everyone went out to do. I feel like they've done a much better job in the last several years with the holiday events. The Mochi Pounding one is really the only one that stays exactly the same. And honestly, I think it's just because they like to make jokes about pounding mochi. I mean, you got to remember the Year of the Cock was... Man, that was a great time for Koji, I'm assuming, in terms of writing. And if you weren't around for the Year of the Cock, the conversation went exactly how you might be thinking based on my reaction. I'm going around everyone, and, you know, it's the Year of the Cock, and I want them to pet my cock. And he's got a chocobo. He's like... But everyone keeps giving me weird looks. And I'm just like, oh, Koji's been waiting to do this his whole career, hasn't he? He's just been waiting for the... It's like, oh, one day, Year of the Cock, I'm going to get him. I know it. But yeah, other than that, I'm okay. I want them to change the events. I like it when they keep them fresh, especially when we get the anniversary event, which has been different every year. But I don't think they really need to do as much as you might be suggesting. I think they're pretty on point with them for the most part. Question number 7. Howdy Haps. Hope the new year is going well. Going well so far. It's been a very chill start to the new year. Hopefully yours is going well too. I was thinking about some abilities that might get removed for the expansion. I'm curious to think how you would feel about Sleep and Repose getting removed. When I first started playing, I used Repose on a lot of low-level dungeons, but in reality, it's not that useful. You can easily handle large pulls in dungeons, since any creature wakes up upon getting attacked. It's hard to think of many scenarios it would be useful. Bonus points, name one ability you have no problem the devs removing for Shadowbringers. So the only problem with Sleep in particular is the level 10 Thaumaturge quest is actually supposed to require... Okay, you really don't need to do it, but the quest... It actually tells you to sleep the enemies along the way. And pretty much the number one way for doing a level 10 Thaumaturge quest, I think it's 10, it might be 15, is to sleep all the enemies, interact with the thing at the end before they wake up, and then you're done. That's it. I mean, you can kill them one by one, but a new player might actually still have trouble with that. Because I remember in beta and in earlier Realm Reborn, I did that quest and I was like, these things hurt, and I killed my way very slowly through all of them. I had to go get my cross-class action for Cure in order to survive a lot of that. And then I finally stopped and read the text like the third time I did it. And it said, make sure you sleep your opponents so you can face them one at a time. And it was telling me to sleep them so I could kill them one at a time so I didn't get ganged up on. Not to sleep them and run past. And not that you need to do either of those things, but I mean, I don't think that should stop them from removing them. But those are abilities that could get removed. I wouldn't be surprised to see them stay, only because the way I look at it is if you don't use an action, if they have to replace that action, it's one more action you will be using, and the problem most people are having is there's too many actions that they actively need to use, or they're worried about their hotbar space filling up with active abilities that they need to be managing in every encounter. So if you're removing the ones that you absolutely don't use, it's not as effective as retooling the ones you're already using or condensing, I guess, the amount of actions you need to take in order to actually, achieve what your job's end goal is for its output. So it's a tough call. I would agree that on the pretense of you really don't need these skills. They have some niche uses. I know, especially in Eureka, I've used Repose and Sleep to get past a lot of the more dangerous enemies. It's probably the one place that I value it the most. But for Shadowbringers, we shouldn't have to worry about that because we'll be past Eureka. So it's a tough call. They could, but I don't know that it really fixes much of anything in terms of button bloat, because they're just going to replace it with something else. And something you'll probably actually use, which means more buttons to press. So I'm a bit on the fence, but I think if you're just looking for useless abilities to get rid of, those are pretty high up there. As for one ability that I'd have no problem with them removing, those two are on there, but I'm going to go with Protect. Shit's dumb. It's just there as an additional spell to cast whenever somebody dies, or to cast before the fight starts. It adds so little to the gameplay that you could either remove it or completely rework it to be a little bit more like the PvP version. Either of those options would work for me. Question number 8. Howdy, Mr. Happy. Howdy. Love the work you do. Thank you. Thank you for the kind words. The question of how much time has passed in Eorzea since the last calamity has always bugged me. All the answers I find seemed approximations at best. I know crossover events aren't canon, but are holiday events considered to be. Things such as All Saints Wake and Heavenstern seem to fit so nicely in the world, they just strike me as something that's possible. If so, couldn't we just count the Heavenstern events for the rest? I mean, that's basically the equivalent of counting how many years it's actually been since everything else. Okay, so here's the way that it works with the holiday events. So the holiday events are celebrations of our human calendar, our real life calendar, whereas the main story doesn't take place in the conventions of our real world calendar. So the way you have to look at it is doing the seasonal events and doing the main story are not mutually they are mutually exclusive to one another. You could do 5 Heavensterns because it's been 5 years, but that doesn't mean that the events of the main story have all taken place in that time, because there's not just, that would basically imply that however much time has passed since we started playing is as much time has passed in the game. And we're pretty sure that hasn't been the case up to this point. Again, with the approximations you've probably read, the 1-year bubble theory and all sorts of things like that. But that's the way you have to look at them, is one is based on our calendar, one is based on the in-game calendar, which we can't really get a good read on, which is why there's approximations and nobody just says it's been 5 years in game. So hopefully that makes sense, in that you could go through all the main story and never touch a Heavenstern. So could you say that Heavenstern actually never happened in your character's life? And what if you did 5 Heavensterns, but you haven't finished the main story? Have 5 years now gone by because you've done 5 Heavensterns but haven't finished the story? They're not relatable to each other whatsoever. It's pretty much, they're not canon, they're just not tied timeline-wise to the story. And here is the last question for the week. Hey Haps, long-time viewer, first-time asker, have a bonus of a stress-free week. I'd say I had that. So you know what? Your wish came true. This week probably won't be the case as much with 4.5. It'll be a week of excitement though, but always stress too. So what's your main motivation to keep clearing raids after your first clears? Obviously getting bisc gear for your main job, but after that, is there any point? So when Ultimate is around, it actually is to gear up for Ultimate. I'd say that this was the expansion I had the most motivation up until 4.4. So 4.4 kind of came for me at a rough time, and I kind of was getting more intolerant to having extra raid nights. When we were going through 4.3 and we were going through 4.4, or we were going through early 4.4, you know, I was mega excited. After there was no Ultimate to work towards anymore, I really didn't care about reclearing at that point. Collecting bis is something that is good for leveling for the first few levels for the next expansion, and after that, it's glamour. You know, that's what it's there for. It's a means of access, pretty much, or a means of easing your access into the new stuff. So my motivation going into the next expansion will definitely be, I want to obviously beat it the first time, but then I want to be geared up for the next Ultimate, and then after that Ultimate, I want to make sure that I'm, you know, fresh and prepared and, you know, skill-wise ready for the next raid tier, and then I gear up for the next Ultimate, then get skill-wise ready for the last raid tier, then gear up for the final Ultimate, hoping we have 3 Ultimates in the next expansion, and this is the main reason why. Way more motivation to go into the raid, improve, focus on doing my best, get all the best gear, because there's something waiting for me at the end of it all. And that, for me, is kind of my biggest motivation with climbing the item level treadmill at all, pretty much. Yeah, it resets every 7 months or so, but I'm okay with that because that means for the next 7 months, I know exactly where I need to be or what I need to be focusing on. So that's how it is for me at the very least. So have you ever checked out the speedrunning community for 14? Ever considered doing any dungeon, raid, or trial speedruns? So I have done speed kills for the raids. Kind of going back to what I was saying before, towards the end of 4.4, towards the midpoint of 4.4, I became a lot more, I guess, it was really hard to raid with me at that point because with no Ultimate, I really just wanted to get into the raid nights, get my bis, and be done. I didn't want to focus on the speed killing aspect anymore. I just didn't think the fights were that fun to speed kill. I thought they were fun to execute on, but not fun to, like, I guess, you know, do LB cheeses and stuff like that. I just didn't care for these fights. Whereas in 4.3, you know, after when we were preparing for 4.4, and I think even before while we were preparing for Ultimate, you know, my raid team would go in a bunch of extra nights, and I didn't always want to do extra nights, but we would be focusing on things like, you know, trying to get faster kills or higher parses, and I had a few like 95%, 98% way back then on the first couple fights, and I'd always like fall into like the mid to high 80s for the third fight, and then but by the time I get to the fourth fight, I'm always just like, yo, I see people dying left and right. I just want to win, dude. I just want to clear this shit for the week. You guys, I'll make sure you guys get whatever parts you want with whatever my timings need to be to get you the best numbers. I don't give a shit about my own. At this point, I'll have fun with the parsing on the earlier fights and not care so much about like Trine cheese or the 100% safe spot for Trine and Kefka or something like that, you know? So dungeons also, like, I enjoy doing dungeons fast, but like not competitively. I just like doing them fast because it's really fun to holy everything as a white mage or get a good AoE rotation going on a DPS job. And trials, I haven't really like many of the trials this expansion. Shinryu I liked, but not one that I'd want to speedrun. Susanoo actually probably the one I'd be most interested in doing fast kills on. Lakshmi I don't want to go anywhere near. Byakuya, kill me now. Tsukiyomi also a pretty good one. And I actually like Suzaku, but in terms of a speed kill, not terribly interested. That's something again that would have been more interesting to me in the 3.x ones like Sephiroth. Sephiroth, Sophia, and Zervin actually all like I kind of liked going as fast as I could for those. Not so much for Nidhogg. But for those three, and not for Thornton either. Ravana was really fun to try and speed kill. And Bismarck was not, because you're kind of stuck on a cycle with Bismarck, so it's not very fun. Yeah, no, I guess I just kind of broke it down fight by fight, but I guess hopefully I made a point somewhere in all my ramblings about my feeling regarding speed killing. I like that there's something for people to do, though, and I wish it was supported more. And there's ideas that I've had that would be for people who like doing that kind of stuff, but we haven't seen any of it implemented, so unfortunately my thoughts kind of just trail off at that point because it just ends up not mattering. And then what's it called, I found a while ago that I was bored with raid content once I had my first clear, no motivation to do it, and started speedrunning dungeons where bisc gear was a huge advantage. Yeah, I mean, I want people to enjoy, that's kind of one of the big things, you know. I've played a lot of Final Fantasy 14 and I've been playing more 11 lately, and often the conversation comes up about either you know, solo play or BIS, or, you know, comparing the two concepts in the two games. And one of the big things for me with Final Fantasy XIV is that it can be approached kind of in any way you want to. I call it a shallow ocean, where there's a bunch of things, a bunch of activities, a bunch of microcosms, but the water is never very much past your knees, pretty much. So you can always dip into everything, but the only way to go any deeper than that is to dive in head first. And that's when you get stuff like speedrunning dungeons, or, you know, soloing Heaven on High or Palace of the Dead. Like those are the deep divers that basically make their own depth to those individual microcosms. Whereas other MMOs tend to be very deep lakes, where you look at kind of what your main goal is and you just dive into those things. And those are kind of the main things that you focus on. And I like that with 14, and even now more with modern Final Fantasy 11 versus the old Final Fantasy 11, is when you jump in, you really are the master of your own destiny. You pick the thing you really want to work on and you go work on it. So if you want to speedrun dungeons, who's going to tell you that's stupid, don't do it? Who gives a shit? That's what you're enjoying doing. Just like there's people who, for some reason, and I won't understand, enjoy raising their chocobos up to level 9, or up to, you know, whatever it's called, 9 for the chocobo racing. I don't want to go anywhere near the chocobo racing. There's people who, you know, PvP, you know, who focus on the feast and get top 100 every week, or do the revival wings, meaning the event where people actually go do rival wings for once on the weekends. And there's all those things, and it's like, I may not think those things are necessarily as fun, but I'm under no circumstance telling somebody they shouldn't enjoy it. And I feel like that's the advantage of Final Fantasy XIV, is you have these options in the first place. It might be a shallow ocean, but at least everyone's splashing around in it and having a good time. And that's the thing that matters most. So those are my thoughts on everything you asked, and those are my thoughts on kind of your final point of why you enjoy those things. So thank you for asking your questions for this week, and that's it for this week's episode of Mondays with Mr. Happy. I'm going to get back to watching some GDQ. I got to get something to drink and maybe eat some dinner as well. But other than that, thank you again to our Patreon sponsors, our patrons of light, all of our different tiers of patrons, and hopefully you guys are looking forward to some YouTube content this week. A lot of first clears of the 24-man, first clears of the dungeons, first clears of Seiryu Normal, first clears of Seiryu Extreme. When Blue Mage comes out, we'll do a comprehensive guide on where to learn all the spells. We'll do videos on each of the different pieces of the Masked Carnival. Not that I think many people will need help with them, but it's nice to do, especially with the challenges on the various weeks. And as Blue Mage gets updated in 5.x, we already have somewhat of an idea of what to expect. Anyway, thank you for watching. I will see all of you in the next video, in the next episode. And if you have questions, ask them. Go to the description, go to the forums down there, and post in those forums, and you can guarantee that it'll see when I pull the question up on the screen, I'm pulling them up from the forums. That's what I'm doing. Bam, 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 bam. But anyway, thank you again. I will see all of you next week for Mondays with Mr. Happy, as we will no doubt have to... Man, am I going to have to hold back spoilers and stuff for next... We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Anyway, I'll see you guys next week. And until then, take care.